Welcome to Why Don't We Dress for Dinner Anymore with hosts Teddy Crockman, senior style icon,
and Melissa Pierce, entrepreneur and documentarian. Today, we want to welcome our guest, Jess Crane. And I want to just give Jess a little bit of an intro so you all know kind of what her background is. Jess is a multidisciplinary artist and business consultant whose expertise spans the realms of fashion, music, and creative entrepreneurship. As the founder of Jess Crane Design, she has been a driving force in product development and concept design for both major corporations and up-and-coming brands. In addition, Jess has impacted the fashion industry with her work on the board of AIBI, which stands for Apparel Industry Board Incorporated, and currently chairs the nominations committee for FGI, which is Fashion Group International. So we've got some big hitting groups here that Jess is part of and influences their missions. Her passion for preserving and celebrating local fashion history shines through her ongoing research project in Chicago's rich fashion legacy.
We're going to dig into that.
Jess has a BFA in fashion design from the Illinois Institute of Art, Chicago, and an MS in recreation, sports, and tourism from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So welcome to our podcast, Jess.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, let me tell you, the first question I want to ask you is, you have such diverse background in studies from your undergraduate to your graduate degree. So you start out in fashion design, and then you specialize in recreation, sports, and tourism. So these, to me, seem like very disparate areas of expertise. Did you find a nexus between these disciplines, or, why did you go from fashion design to recreation, sports, and tourism? Right. It's kind of like, explain it.
What a loaded question.
Yes, always.
So when I went into fashion design, I was actually interested in designing car interiors and furniture. And there weren't schools in the local area that offered that kind of education. I would have had to go somewhere else. And at that point in my life, I wasn't really interested in moving somewhere else. So I was taking studio arts in junior college, and I started stitching into my canvases. And the teachers there said, have you ever considered fashion design? Because I also would wear really interesting outfits, I was in a band at that time, and so I had all different kind of like loud and fun clothes.
What's the name of this band, and can we find anything online about them? I need to know.
Yeah, so the band was called Quarters Only.
Okay.
And it was a ska rock band, so that's why it has kind of a silly name.
It was a what kind of band?
It was ska. It's like happy punk with horns.
I haven't. Yeah. See, I learn something new every time. I've never heard of this in my entire life. What is it? Ska?
Ska.
Yeah.
And what does it mean?
It's like happy punk with horns. And they usually wear plaid pants and they strut around.
Really?
Ska was like my senior.
Checkerboard. Yeah.
Never heard of this in my entire life.
My favorite band was called Skankin' Pickle.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen Skankin' Pickle. I don't think we played with them, but we were a band for quite a while in the local area, and so yeah, I dressed kind of interesting from that, and so I was like stitching into my canvases, and my teacher was like, "Have you considered fashion design?" And that's how I kind of ended up going over to fashion and getting to know a little bit more about that, and ended up going to school in Chicago, got my BFA in that. And I've been working in the fashion industry since about 2007.
Okay.
And my goal was to design products that people could use and enjoy globally, like so throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up reaching that goal very early in my career. Like I started out doing technical design, pattern making, and fitting with a mid-sized company downtown Chicago called Henry Lee and Company. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I also did fabric sourcing and buying with that company. And then I got hired on to work for Sears Holdings Corporation. So I was designing bedding, draperies, towels, rugs for Sears and Kmart stores. And so I did that for a while and realized that I was a number making a lot of money for a giant corporation.
Yeah.
And the environment there wasn't really like working for me. It wasn't like a healthy environment for me. And it was a long commute. I was still living in the city, traveling off from the States, because in Chicago, a lot of the businesses like that are outside of the city limits.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really interested in moving off from the States at that point in time either. I was younger and doing a lot of things in the city. So I did that for a while, and I had a lot of people asking me all the time, oh, you make clothes. I have an idea for this apparel collection. Could you help me? Can you help me develop it? Can you help me design? And after so many people asking, I realized there was a business in this. So I started a business doing that. People would come to me with ideas. I'd help them with their concepts. I'd help them design and develop. So doing all the pattern making, sourcing, specifications, finding contractors, sample sewing onto like.
Now, if I could interrupt for a minute. At this point, had you gotten your master's degree in the recreation, sports, and tourism?
No.
What? How was that you're doing kind of what you're doing now, but then you like took this hard shift and you're like, let me go try something new.
Yeah. So during that time, while I was doing this work for people, I was also taking on contract gigs. So I did textile print design for White House Black Market down in Florida for a while. I did a couple of other long-term like gigs here and there. And I just realized, like there was something missing in my life. Like something just it just didn't seem right. I felt, I have like a very strong pull to community, and was very much getting involved with like setting up networking events and things like that. I've always loved setting up events and bringing people together, especially like creatives with businesses. Mm-hmm. So with that, I started looking around and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like I haven't made my own apparel collection. I've been helping other people launch theirs and launch their businesses. Now I'm being hired as a consultant to come into businesses and like help them figure out what's wrong with my business or how do I improve my processes. So I'm like, what am I doing? So at that point I thought about getting involved in education. I was like, I'd love to teach this kind of information to higher learning, at like a college or university. So I looked into maybe getting into instructional design. There was a lot of like designing courses that people take online for schools. And when I was researching that, I came across this master's in recreation, sports, and tourism. And in a previous life, I'm a seasoned athlete, so I have that connection to it. I love traveling, and I've even considered being a travel agent at some point in my life. I love planning a trip, and like I do that with my family every year. And the recreation part was really interesting to me. The course load that they were offering was like strategic marketing, strategic management, event planning. So it was like all of these things that seemed to kind of fit into what I was interested in.
Right. I thought it was completely divergent, but you're like, no, this matched what was happening with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I was doing the studies there, one of the things I did was leisure studies. And I got to understand more about leisure time and like what that is and the kind of effort that's been put into leisure in the past and like why we have national parks.
We have to back up and be aghast at the fact that there is a class called leisure studies.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I don't know. I guess they teach you anything.
Oh, right. They break out the hammocks. They break out the hammocks. You just pass one around. It's like, this is.
Are you designing hammocks, Jess? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
I've been to leisure studies class. Okay, so leisure studies, it's a real class, and you learn something super valuable in it. What was it?
Yeah, so basically, there's a whole history and effort that's been put into leisure time in like the United States. Like we have our national park systems, our state park systems. There was like progress that we've gone through with like funding for those types of things. There's, institutions like the YMCA and like community organizations. And, there's the labor force and how many hours people were expected to work, and then workers' rights and all of that, like balancing together. Like it was learning about all this was just unfolding this whole new interesting thing to me and helping me see how the way that we work today and not utilizing or having enough time for leisure, how that affects us as a society, which also affects our choices and what we do in our daily lives, what we buy, like all that kind of stuff. So it was really interesting.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. And reminds me of our interview with Donna Asadi, who talked about how busy Americans were.
Yeah.
And that like nothing was an event anymore. It was just the next thing to do.
Donna, who a fashion designer who we've interviewed previously for our podcast, actually her master's degree is in nuclear physics. So she's basically a rocket scientist. So the question we asked her was basically the same as we just asked you. How do you go from rocket science, nuclear physics, to fashion design? And she talked about, she did what she thought she needed to do to satisfy her family. They're very high education family, doctors, lawyers, that kind of thing. But she really discovered that she enjoyed what she had done originally as a child, which was making clothes with her aunt and her mom and that kind of thing. And she learned to develop the business, and her scientific thought process gave her skills for designing and that kind of thing. So back to you in a very similar situation where you actually started out with an education in design where Donna had none. And then it seems like you became dissatisfied with what you were doing, even though it sounds like you were very, very successful at it.
You were good at it. Yes.
And it sounds to me, now tell me if I'm wrong, Jess, but it sounds to me like you had like a little existential break there for a minute. And I can relate to that because I was a therapist and I became burnt out after about 5 years of hearing people's problems and just feeling sometimes overwhelmed by all the problems that they brought to me, that I actually went and sold cars for like 3 months.
Really?
I swear to God, I was a car salesman.
This is her car salesman.
A car salesman.
I wish I would have known that.
I was a very cute car salesman. In fact, I have a tie that has little cars on it from my car salesman. But it sounds like you went through a little bit of kind of what I went through. You have this successful career, you're doing well in it, you're good at it, but it's just not feeling like it's enough. So you go into another area that you have interest in. So bringing all that back, because it looks like right now you're currently in the same industry that you had become dissatisfied with, only you're working for yourself. So what would you say your master's degree in recreation and leisure and tourism brings to your consulting firm now?
Yeah, so what I do right now, it's kind of interesting. Like, I also had a big pivot after all of this. So, like, I got my master's degree, and then I started to have a lot of health issues, and I ended up having, like, a chronic illness and a disability. So that really changed the scope of life for me. I went from basically being, like, not functional at all to being able to now like attend fashion events. Like it was a really big deal for me. And we have a really great community here. And a lot of people have kind of gone through that with me and been really like understanding and helpful with like whatever I needed. But so that on top of like learning what I did about leisure studies and recreation and how important that is in our life, and like seeing the scope of the world that we live in. We have people are online all the time. People are spending less time in person together. There's a lot of issues with like younger people who are growing up that are having difficulties with like isolation and having to like compare yourself constantly to people posting things on social media, you know, and everybody's like best life is out there on social media, you know. And so all of that kind of circling back around led me into the nonprofit space. So my business consulting work also became consulting work for nonprofits.
Oh.
Yeah. And it came about actually from a different industry. So I'm from a farm in the southwest suburbs, and I'm living out here again. So like after my illness, I had moved back to the suburbs for like family support. My husband got a job here, so here we are. I never thought I would live a couple miles from where I grew up after living in the city and moving out of state and everything. But so being back here and being around that community again, like the farm community, there is a group here that maintains old farm equipment. And they have a show that's 4 days long every year. People can come out, experience yesteryear, and they get to see all of this old machinery and equipment in action. It's phenomenal. Like they see the steam engines and
they operate all of these things as well. It's not like a museum. It's like, this is how it's functioned.
Yeah, they have a field out there. We had horses pulling a old combine, like stuff that people
you just don't think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they needed help with their website. And these are old farm men who don't really understand email. So as a consultant, I'm like, well, what are your goals? We need younger members because we're all old. And as we're passing away, we need people to take over. We need more revenue channels to bring in more money. I'm like, okay, so we need a website, we need social media, we need all these things. And so I started working with them. And then FGI was needing somebody to be the nomination chair. So I stepped in with them. AIBI needed board members. I got in with them. So my nonprofit work with the tractor group circled back to then nonprofit work with the fashion groups.
But this all circles into your idea that we need to spend more in-person time and actually connect.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now we got to weave fashion back in.
Yes. And here's my next fashion question.
Okay.
Because it's a good one. What influenced you ultimately to create a career in product development and concept design? Now, I know you went into quite a bit of that. And initially, when I had read your bio and read about your business and all that kind of stuff, I was wondering, you know, it sounded like you were running a consulting firm. You did some design, product design. But since your focus was fashion design, is there a crossover between fashion design, because you're actually constructing clothing, to product design? Because I mean, those are two still very different things. Product design can be designing the look of a package. The product design can be the look of a pamphlet, which really is very, very different than fashion design. So how did your background in fashion design influence your current career, which is partly based on conceptual product design?
Well, right now the design work that I'm doing now is mostly been for nonprofits. So there was a group called Treveni Institute, and they bring awareness to single-use plastic pollution. And they had a fashion show where everybody made things out of single-use plastic.
Okay.
I've done that twice now and made runway-ready garments for those kind of shows. And that's
plastic.
Yeah. And so then Another one I did was called the Discard Disco, and it was for a group called the Waste Shed. And the Waste Shed repurposes old used art materials back into the community and saves them.
Yeah, I was just there. With my daughter.
Oh,
we find all kinds of great art supplies.
Yeah, so their Discard Disco, what they do is they give you a mystery box of materials, and you have to use that box of materials to create a runway ready look. And that's also a fundraiser for their organization.
I see. So you're not really, okay. So let me back up for a minute. So in my head, I'm thinking you're designing like packaging for products or things like that. It sounds like you're mainly doing kind of event planning that incorporates fashion into it for these businesses.
Right, which would be product design, but in a
fashion way.
In hospitality and tourism, they would call that a product. And
well, this brings up a really good point about the fashion industry, how confusing the job titles are, especially because of tech. Like tech, the name of like tech jobs have caused issues for people trying to find jobs in development in the fashion industry, because if you go and search on like LinkedIn, for example, you're looking for product development or product designer. That's no longer just a physical product. Like you were mentioning, it could be packaging, but even in that, product development in the tech world is like computer stuff.
Yeah, and that's like graphic art, which has nothing to do with fashion.
Not even
design.
that. It's like program.
It's it's like, how do I design this software to function?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then technical design, like being a technical designer in fashion is dealing with like the specifications and measurements of the garment and like the fit and function. And if you try to search for a job like that, you end up getting like stuff that's not even related to fashion.
Sure.
So there are different like ways to talk about it, but the product development that I did was mostly soft goods. Like I did drapery, rugs, towels, and bedding. With some of my clients, I had done like bag development design, like handbags. We did a hat, different like sewn accessories, I guess. So sewn products. So maybe it'd be better to say like sewn product development.
Okay. So now it all makes sense. Because when I was looking into your business, and then you had sent me kind of your brief bio, and I'm thinking, well, boy, she did a real 180 here, and this does not seem connected to this at all. So naturally, my first question was going to be, how are these connected? Now it all makes sense, because in my mind, like I said, I'm thinking you are helping to develop packaging, or when I think of product development or product design, I'm thinking of like this cup or
like
something.
Mug. Yeah.
Oh, but I have to wonder, did the tractor thing, where you look at the history of looking at older farm equipment and how it works, did this spark your idea of your project of preserving Chicago's fashion history, or was it something else?
It actually did.
It did. Okay.
I mean, I've always been really interested in history. I love people's stories. I've done like pretty thorough ancestry research on my family. And like my family farm that I grew up on, one of them is a centennial farm. So it's like, it started in like 1870.
What do you farm? What does your family farm?
We were crop farmers. So wheat, corn, soybeans. I think they had animals probably back in like the 1800s.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, it was wheat, corn, soybeans mostly, and sweet corn. We had one of the bigger sweet corn farms in the Midwest. Like our corn was in Winn-Dixie stores, like in the United States. Yeah. So, but wait, what was the question?
It was about your research that you're doing currently on the fashion of, I believe when I ran across your Instagram site on that, I believe it said on there that you were doing research or putting a book together about the history of fashion in Illinois. I don't think it said Chicago, did it?
Right. Yeah.
And it's the history of Illinois fashion, which intrigued me, because I'm thinking, me being a Chicago-lander all my life, I'm thinking, there's fashion outside of Chicago in Illinois?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I put Illinois, because the rest of us in Illinois exist.
Yeah.
I live in the southwest suburbs, right? And I know my grandma always told me stories about how her grandmother was one of the most sought after seamstresses and tailors in Joliet.
Uh-huh.
And so when I was doing this research work for the Tractor Group, like I was looking at old news articles. There's a huge database for that now. And one of them that I pulled up had an ad in it for like a seamstress tailoring company in Joliet. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, I want to know more about these people. I want to know more about this business and what was going on. I want to find more of these. And I was like, I should post this on social media. People would love it. And then I was like, wait a second. I should turn this into a whole thing. Cause like, I'm so excited about this. Like there's more of these ads.
Well, it just interested me, just even the concept, because, if you had said, you were looking at the history of fashion in Chicago, I'd say, okay, well, that's going to be interesting. But when you said the fashion of Illinois, again, being, very urban centric, I guess you call it. I'm thinking, well, how much fashion was out there in the rural areas? And in fact, that brings me to another question. Because you've moved out to the rural area, you said you lived in Chicago for about 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you said to me that even now there's a difference between the way rural people dress compared to the Chicago city or the suburbs. And since we're an era of social media, online, it would be different if it was maybe even 20 years ago, we were still kind of siloed. But now we have exposure to not only people in our own country, but all over the world. I mean, literally on Instagram, that's one of the, we always talk about the downside of social media. But one of the wonderful things that I found on social media is I have friends now, literally all over the world, from China to Africa to Europe. It's fascinating. And I get to see their style and the way they dress, and, we all influence each other. So that being the case, I'm sure in the rural areas, they have computers and social media. Can you tell me why there's a difference? I would think we're all kind of more blending now just because we have access to each other. But you were saying that there's really still a difference between the way people in the rural areas of Illinois dress compared to maybe the Chicagoland area. Could you expound on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on how far rural you want to consider rural. So like, since we're talking about farmers, like if we talk about like laborers in general, and there's apparel that's created for function of those kind of occupations. Yes. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, Carhartt. Carhartt is for laborers, and now it's become this like cool thing to wear. And I've heard laborers say like, oh, they're wearing the Carhartt style without the Carhartt life. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So there's that type of dress that's different. And from the people that I know that work laborious jobs all day, when you come home from work, you don't really want to get dressed up. And to another point on that, the clothing that's available in fast fashion, that is dress clothing that is typically available to people, is not comfortable. So there is that whole association where dressing fancy is uncomfortable. So that's one part of it. But then we would have what the farmers might call town folk. And that's the people that live in subdivisions and maybe they work in the city and commute, or they work office jobs. And I feel like the people that do that kind of work typically have gravitated towards what's the new trend items that are available in the department store or the mall. But we are seeing that the department store and the mall are kind of suffering to an extent right now because of the availability of fashion online.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are shopping based on what they see their friends or influencers wearing online. But I feel like most of the buying power, like most of the influence, is coming from the bombardment of advertising. So when you go on Instagram, you're like trying to scroll through your feed, you are being fed product after product after product. True. And when you go to shop on a store like Amazon, you are being shown certain things, and you can buy things in like a couple of seconds now without even really thinking.
I have purchased things at 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. Laying in bed, scrolling through Instagram. You're like, that's
I really like that thing. I'm going to get it before it goes away. And I'm up anyway, because I'll wake up and I'll just like buy something and then I'll go back to sleep. I mean, that's, crazy when I think about it now.
Yeah.
I would have never thought 20 years ago that would even be a possibility. So what I'm hearing you say, Jess, is basically, farm laborers, farmers, people who are working hard physical jobs all day long. And it's totally understandable. You're working hard physical jobs all day long. You come home, you're not going to feel like getting into a party dress or a tuxedo or even a shirt and tie. You want to relax, chill out and have some leisure time. And that makes 100% sense to me,
Right. But I'm a town folk. And when I get home, I also don't want to get dressed up in a
you're just a different story.
Right?
You're the reason we created this podcast.
I'm also
Why don't we dress for dinner anymore? Damn it.
And so that was something else that I was kind of thinking about when I was thinking about all of this is, I think there's a terminology going on. So getting dressed, I think dressing is different than like fashioning, if that makes sense. Because you think about the necessities of life. Okay, you need food, water, shelter. And you could probably add clothing in there as like a form of shelter.
Well, you need some kind of clothing to keep you warm or whatever.
So that's a necessity. And like, if you're like, I'm thinking back to my grandma having 5 children on this farm, way far out from Joliet. She doesn't have a driver's license. She can't drive into Joliet to go shopping. And they probably don't even have the money to go shopping. Like my dad has told me stories about having shoes that don't fit, because he's outgrowing them and they don't have, you know what I mean? So there's a different mentality when it comes to that. It's not so accessible. So the fashion component of it kind of falls to the wayside, where it's more about what you having your needs met.
Right, because there is not a need to be seen as town folk might. If you were going into town, you would dress up a little bit more because you might see somebody and need to make an impression or something like that.
Do you see, let me ask this. Do you see any of that changing with the younger population, or is it still carrying through?
I think, so like that, I was kind of looking at, the necessity versus like the fashion of it. And I do think fashion is a necessity in some regards, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that with the overabundance of everything, so like we're being bombarded with ads, we're being bombarded with products. Like you go to the grocery store to buy groceries and they're selling clothing there, so like.
Yeah, Costco.
Yeah.
In fact, I just bought a pair of shorts at Costco a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And even sometimes at Jewel, Jewel grocery store, they'll have clothing.
Yeah.
So it's just, everything is just kind of everywhere all the time. And so how special does that make clothing to you? Where it's like you go to the grocery store and there it is, there's a t-shirt. Oh, I like the print that's on the t-shirt. I'll buy it. And it's like poorly constructed, terrible material, going to be in a landfill kind of thing, So I think that an overabundance causes some issues, but I think that
like a devaluation of the importance of a well-constructed or a well-made or a good-looking garment.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the topic of your podcast, like why don't we get dressed for dinner anymore? I think that part of that is oversaturation, overstimulation. What do you call it? Like, I open up Amazon and I look for a product that I need to buy, and so many options pop up that I'm overwhelmed.
So it's like choice paralysis. Like there are too many choices, so I don't need to make any. And this goes back to my theory. I think people are just rebelling against everything they have to do. Okay.
Yeah, because the abundance.
Go ahead, Jess.
Because also the abundance, you see that in restaurants. Like where I live on a farm, like we would go out to the restaurant and it was like a thing. Like, right. Yeah, we didn't like dress up, but like it was a thing because
you didn't wear your overalls there.
No. But today, like there are so many restaurants within reachable distance. It's easier to get to them. There's so many options. And like, it's like, there's so many that a lot of them just aren't as special anymore. Like they're kind of the same. Like, I don't want to say they're not special. It's just the idea of going out for dinner doesn't seem like a treat. Whereas like, that's what we would usually like get dressed up for.
Okay, so in your same vein as fashion, it's become devalued because it's just available everywhere. You're saying we don't dress for dinner because there are so many restaurants you can go to. They are also not that important. It's just another place where you can get food.
Yeah, and a lot of the restaurants now, like, yeah, they're cooking food there, but a lot of that is even like pre-made food. You know, it's like,
yeah. Well, and I think what you're saying is, especially in rural areas, there may be an abundance of restaurants, but they're not really high quality restaurants. They tend to be the chains like Chili's and Applebee's and Panda Express or whatever. So yeah, those aren't special. And so I guess when we're asking the question, why don't we get dressed for dinner anymore? It's probably more of an urban Chicagoland suburban question, or any big city in the United States, because we do have fine dining in the Chicagoland area. They're not all chain restaurants. They are special restaurants. They're restaurants that are very costly, that, you know, some of them cost as much as somebody makes in almost a half a week. And yet we're still seeing people walk into these restaurants in a very casual manner. I remember, and I think I told this story in a previous podcast, but my husband and I, probably about 20 years ago, went to the Rainbow Room in New York, which was always considered a very special restaurant. They have a band there. You see the whole New York City from it, you know, floor to ceiling windows. And at that time, now this is 20 years ago, if a man walked in without a jacket, they actually had a rack of jackets of sizes so that they could give the men, because they would not even allow them in the restaurant without being properly dressed, which meant women had to look appropriate, not blue jeans, and then had to wear, you know, jackets. And my guess is, I haven't been to the Rainbow Room for 20 years, but my guess is they probably had to stop that or they wouldn't have any more customers. So that being said, I think that's really the premise of our podcast is, what happened? What was the cultural shift? Yes, it makes sense to me. If you're in a rural area, you're working a laborious job all day long, you're not going to get, you know, dressed in your finery to go to Applebee's or Chili's. But
those might be the like finest dining in those areas. I mean, there's an overabundance of casual dining.
No, we have
growing up on military bases, and Olive Garden was like the height. That is the best restaurant you would get to.
Oh my God, gag me.
Yeah. We have our special places here that like they've been around for a long time. They're like considered our fine dining, and people do dress up, but like you're saying, like they do still show up in jeans.
Yeah.
You know, I do think that a lot of that has to do with our lifestyle and our consumerism, because, you know, everything is fast and on the go. We're busy all the time. Nobody, like, if you're out and about, you're not going to go home to get changed to then go to dinner. Some people might. I think a lot of people wouldn't. When I lived in the city, it was like you could walk to different things. Like here, if I'm out doing errands or out in town, like for me to come back home to like get changed to then go back out somewhere else to dinner, like it's a lot of time. Yeah. So I think that might be one component, but I do think that maybe the workforce doesn't expect people to dress as much anymore.
Right. And that casual Fridays just killed everything.
And working from home.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And working from home. Well, then here's a jumbo question for you. Since you're involved in these organizations that want to promote fashion, like Fashion Group International and the Apparel Industry Board, you're painting a really grim picture for fashion. I mean, it's like, who's going to bother to get dressed? We're all tired. We're all pooped. We're working from home. Who feels like getting dressed? So if I were going to be a fashion designer, I would be very discouraged at this particular point, because to me, from the picture we're painting, it sounds like there's no real future for any fashion, let alone high fashion, because everybody's lifestyle is so drudgery.
Right.
And horrible. To me, let me just put my very strong opinion on this. People work damn hard in the 30s and the 40s, and they were still able to manage to get dressed for dinner. I don't think people were working any less in the 30s, 40s, and 50s than they are now. Every generation is the woe is me. We're this, we're overwhelmed. Everybody's been overwhelmed always.
Right.
So the question is, why in the last 10 years or 20 years or however long you feel that the dress has become so casual on a regular basis that it's just the uniform that we wear? Is there any future for fashion? Because if I were a fashion designer and I'm listening to these conversations, I'd think to myself, who's going to buy my stuff? There's so much out there. There's so much competition. It's everywhere that it's cheaply made. It's, why bother? I mean, so if I were in the fashion industry right now, I'd say this is a very grim outlook here.
Save us.
Cheer me up here, will you?
Save us, Jess.
Cheer us up. What's the alternative here?
So with all of the overabundance of fast fashion and all that, and like busy time, like this kind of goes back to my leisure studies and how important all of that is on our society. It's easy now to just buy things quick online. It is. Everybody does it, I'm sure. Maybe there's a couple people that don't. Cool. But pretty much everyone has. It's also become difficult when you need to buy things from the store and you go there and they don't even carry the products anymore, and then you end up having to buy things online. But what this is leading to is kind of a burnout, like we were talking about before, when Teddy became a car salesman for a while, car salesperson.
Yes, I actually did.
I think there's an overwhelm that's reaching people. People are starting to kind of, I was talking with somebody about this the other day, and it's like apathy. It's like people seem to care less now about things in general. It's like everybody's just kind of over it. And I think that burnout is shifting people back to stepping away from all of the stuff that's bombarding them all of the time. So like you also mentioned, back in the 30s and 40s, people did all of this work. And I don't
went
think
through a major depression where they couldn't even afford to buy food, let alone clothes.
And I wouldn't say that it was less work at that point in time, but I would ponder if it was less overstimulation, because we're bombarded all the time. Our brains are constantly being fed advertisements and information. Like you drive to go somewhere, you got billboards, not just stationary billboards. You've got video billboards doing stuff while you're driving. You've got advertisements and the things you're listening to advertisements coming, if you're consuming any kind of.
Okay, but that being said, it's only going to get worse. We have AI coming. It's really going to bombard you. And there's going to be,
I wonder.
you're not going to know if they're real or they're AI or it's, let's put it this way. It's not going to slow down. So how does the fashion industry respond to that?
I will tell you what I think may happen.
That's what we want to hear.
I think that you're going to be able to wear whatever you want to wear that day. And that is going to completely change the way fashion operates. Almost like, have you seen Star Trek, like the Replicator?
Oh, yeah. I was a huge Star Trek Next Generation fan.
I think that we're going to be able to create clothing on demand, wear it, and recycle it back in, and then create clothing to wear. Like, I think we're going to get to that kind of circular at some point. I'm not saying.
Do you think, since you brought up Star Trek, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, do you think we're going to get to the point where fashion really doesn't factor in at all? If you notice on Star Trek, they all basically wear the same outfit, just in different colors based on their station in the ship. So really everybody is wearing the exact same outfit. There really is no fashion on Star Trek because they're all wearing the same jumpsuit.
Maybe the guy who programmed their knitting machine only knew like one.
Yeah.
Are we going to become like the People's Republic of China that was back in the 70s where everybody, men and women, all wore the same outfits and caps and there was no, I mean, so I hate to say, to me, I love fashion so much that I am optimistic that we go through periods of rebellion. In fact, Melissa and I just filmed a show together where we were talking about how the 70s and the 90s kind of mirrored each other as far as rebellion against fashion and then going back into the glamour. To me, I'm hopeful that right now we're in a little bit of the rebellion of fashion, but that we're going to get tired of that after a while and we're going to want something more in our lives. And so we may gravitate more towards fashion as the casual dressing starts to become old hat and boring. That's my hope.
Right. And that's what I'm interpreting Jess is saying. We're heading towards burnout. We're nearly there. We're going to do the Gen X cigarette burning the car roof, the inside, and just say, fuck it. I'm going to wear whatever I want to wear.
Well, I mean, you could do that now. You could wear whatever you want to wear. That's a problem. People are wearing whatever the heck they want to wear. They don't look so hot.
And so we're in that. But then you're like, things are going to start to get interesting because we've let go of these other things. We're going to start recycling clothes. We're going to start making what we want. We're going to change. I mean, all I care about is if we show up to a restaurant and we all look fabulous and not like we rolled out of bed. I mean, really, that's what I want in life. That's what the show is about. I just want to see what people are wearing. I hear you saying things are going to change in a much bigger way because the technology that current fashion designers are using is outpacing even our idea of what fashion could be. Is that, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I was inspired by where you were going. So.
Yeah. And I do not think that fashion will go away. I think fashion is a form of expression and creative art. And I feel that it's actually something that our society needs desperately right now.
I think it does.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that Melissa and I felt so strongly about even the title of our podcast, because what we're hoping, if we accomplish nothing else, it's to help to educate people that in fact dressing, whether you are just dressing yourself or you're designing the clothes or you're selling the clothes, you're taking photographs of the clothes, whatever you're doing, there is an art form involved in each one of those areas. And we want people to see fashion as an art form, because it really is a form of self-expression.
Right.
And it's not just, I want to put on my dungarees and go on my tractor, which has its time and place,
Right.
just like any other work person would.
But even choose a hat they like.
Yeah, but what we want is to demonstrate that, in fact, there is an artistic. I mean, you went to an art school to learn fashion design, so there is an art form to fashion. It's not just pounding out the clothes, like you said. A lot of those fast fashion clothes are derived from somebody's creative fashion brain that they're just copying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could look up any designer, find an outfit that I really like, and I can find a cheap $15 version of that.
Yeah, it's
so they get their inspiration from the people who are the artists.
Right.
And so that's really the hope that we have in discussing this with people from all over the fashion industry, is to help to demonstrate that, in fact, fashion in and of itself is an art form that you should be appreciated, just like when you go to the Art Institute and you see all the great artists who are painters.
And I don't want to discourage designers. That's the opposite of what I'm here to do. I'm not here to discourage anyone. What I'm saying is we've kind of been in a slump, and we've been kind of overstimulated, and I do feel that rebellion is coming back in that kind of form. I think that people are tired of being overwhelmed, and now they're looking for alternatives to that. They're taking more time to be involved in actual activities. They're taking time to look at local designers and purchase pieces from them. I have seen more activity of people purchasing from local designers in the past year than I have any other year. I do feel like it's growing, but at the same time, the market's also growing. Like, there are more designers, and everybody's more accessible because of the internet. So I don't want to discourage anyone from that. But to your point of technology and design, there's so many different ways that it's affecting the industry, but maybe some insight I can give from doing product development. It would take a couple of rounds of samples to get a garment to fit correctly. Mm-hmm. And then after you have that garment fitting correctly, in order to make it other sizes, it gets graded. So you start with your sample size, it gets graded into different sizes. And a lot of companies were also grading into plus size, which doesn't really work because the body is so different. Yeah. It's better to start with a different pattern. You could do the same style, but it's a different pattern. It's got to fit the body a different way, and then grade that along the scale that fits in that. Mm-hmm. But my point on all of this is all of that background work to develop the product right now. So I'm wearing a design that I made today.
It's really great.
Thank you. So I bought this material. It's dead stock, and I bought yards of this. I had planned to launch my own miniature collection, limited quantity collection. This is one of the materials I have. So I made this dress design. I did it in a 3D pattern making software called Clo 3D. Yeah. I took a scan of my body, mm-hmm. put that into this program, created an actual avatar of my body, my exact body, not just the measurements, my whole body. And then drafted my pattern right in there and fit it on my own body virtually while I was designing the pattern. This is the first sample, and it's good to go.
Can you stand up? Can we see it? Can you, if you stand?
I don't know if it'll zoom. I might have to just send you a video.
Yeah, we'll chop your head off, but let's see if we can see it by.
We'll chop.
I don't know.
We'll chop your head off.
Yeah. Oh, look at that!
Now, does it have a drop waist? Can you push back a little bit?
It does look like it has a drop waist. Oh, look at this.
Okay, because I need to see the whole thing, Very
I
Am I
love it.
there? No, it keeps zooming.
Oh yeah, you've got it set on motion capture, so it's capturing your face. But we see it's a dress.
Yeah.
It's got
And it
little
has
girl
pockets
face.
too.
Of course it has pockets because you are who you are, Jess. It's incredible.
That's very
Yeah,
cute.
so
And you made that from like an actual avatar of your body.
From a 3D scan of her body, it made the pattern from there. Whereas like when I learned pattern making in middle school, I don't know if you know this, I went to a seamstress to learn pattern making.
No, I did not.
I had to like measure and cut and move things around on
I know
wax paper.
It's certainly, yeah, it's
like,
certainly very actually scientific in a lot of ways when you think about it. Well, geometric,
This is sci-fi.
Yeah. And so I was able to develop and cut and sew this dress technically in one day.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So if somebody wanted this dress, all I'd have to do is send them the app. They scan their body. It sends it to me. I can create an avatar of them.
But do they have a program? Do they have to download?
They would have the app to do
It's just the app, yeah. Like I have a subscription, and then they scan their body using their own phone. And then
these apps to 3D print. So
and then I can create an avatar of them. I can take this dress that I've made and auto grade it.
So this is like custom couture, but at the speed of fast fashion.
Yes.
I mean, maybe not at that, but it's not at scale because it's custom. That's wild. That's incredible.
And so you're cutting down on your sampling and development costs, which then reduces your overhead. Like, there's just so many more opportunities for more affordable fashion this way.
That will be better quality.
That will be, because it'll be custom. Can you imagine just ordering?
I want one of them
online.
I want something like that.
I know, Jess. When does your line open? Come on, when can we get it?
You download this app so you can scan my body.
I will. Yeah. I'll make you something.
Yeah, you got to send me the name of that app.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you. The one I use.
Yeah. Okay, we're pretty excited about this.
That's fabulous. Okay, let me ask this one last intriguing question because we're almost at the dead end point here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but you're so interesting.
You're
so interesting. But I just wanted to ask you real quickly because I come from the behavioral health world. I had a 30-year career in behavioral health. And so you intrigued me that you are also interested in the psychology of fashion, which is what we kind of focus on, the psychology, history, social implications of fashion. And that you also have an interest in neuroplasticity and rewiring, and that you think that also has something to do with how we select the clothes we select.
That's so wild. You have to explain.
So number one, in other words, to break it down for our audience, can you explain briefly what neuroplasticity is, and then why you believe that it affects the clothing choices that we make?
Yeah, so neuroplasticity has to do with the neural pathways of your brain. So for time up until recent in the science world, they thought the brain was not plastic. Like they thought you had what you had.
Right.
You can't change it. Well, what they've come to understand is the brain actually is plastic, and it is evolving past the point of like your youth development. Because they thought after the X amount of years in your life, your brain is what it is. Right. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
That's simply not true. The best example I can give is when a person has had a stroke and maybe loses movement in their arm, let's say. That doesn't mean that they can never move their arm again. We've seen that with physical therapy. So what happens is by being in physical therapy, practicing and like doing that work, you are creating new neural pathways in your brain away from the ones that don't work anymore to then now provide that communication for the function to happen. So I use neuroplasticity, like self-directed brain rewiring for my health, like for my chronic illness. Mm-hmm. And that's what helped me to get to the functional stage that I'm at today, like to the point that I am. Because our brain hears everything we say and everything we think. And so that's like, that kind of leads me into how this affects the way that we dress.
Right.
Yes.
So the best accessory that goes with literally any outfit you wear is confidence. I've always felt that. I've said that my whole life. If you wake up in the morning and you don't like yourself, you say you're ugly, you say you're stupid, you say you're this or that, your brain hears that, and your cells hear that, your body hears that. Your brain and your body, they work together.
Yes, they do.
And it affects your health.
Of your body.
Right.
Yeah. And it affects your physical health, your abilities, and it also affects your energy. So it affects the presence that you have upon the environment that you're in and the people that are in it. So the way that you feel in the morning also affects the kind of clothing that you choose. And maybe that's part of the reason that people are not dressing up now. Maybe people don't feel that great. The world has been a pretty chaotic place for quite a few years now. And like I was saying, people seem kind of apathetic. They don't care anymore. People are getting fed up. People are overwhelmed. Maybe that is like a psychological component when people get up in the morning. That's affecting the clothes that they choose to wear and how they dress and how much they care about are they infecting the people in the environment around them. But so one of the things that you learn in self-directed neuroplasticity and brain rewiring is sometimes the thoughts that you have are signals that you should do the opposite.
All right.
So if you have a day,
cognitive behavior therapy for yourself.
Right. So if you have a day where maybe you're feeling some pain and you think, oh, I should probably rest and just sit here. Maybe sometimes the better thing to do is to do some light exercise, and you'd be surprised how that changes your brain. Endorphin.
If I wake up and I'm like, "Ooh, I feel dumpy," I should put on my most favorite, most colorful, most outlandish outfit. Is that basically what you're saying?
Sometimes that works. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a definite believer in clothes uplifting your spirit. I mean, one of the things that we taught in behavioral health, and of course, cognitive behavioral therapy is the gold standard for therapy. It's, you rewire your brain to think in ways that are logical, because our brains aren't always logical. They're more emotional.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've often said that one of the best first of all, we can detect depression in several ways. And one of them is a person's appearance. If somebody looks like they haven't washed their hair in a week and they look slovenly or whatever, that's an indication they may be depressed.
Yeah.
I mean, that is that is a symptom of clinical depression. So I always say, if you get up, and I would always pick my clothes the day before. So I didn't pick my clothes for the mood I'm in. I picked my clothes for the way I wanted to feel the next day.
That's a really good point.
Huh?
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because
and so if I picked, let's say I thought, tomorrow I'm going to a meeting. There's going to be a lot of important people there. I would really want to impress people. I'm going to put on that outfit because I look darn good in it. I put it on. And just like you said, Jess, I cannot tell you how many people have commented. Teddy, when you walk into a room, you take the entire room over. And it's not, I'm a tiny person. You've seen me. I'm like 5 feet tall, I'm like a little elf. But I make sure that I'm recognized, that I have a voice in the room. And one of the best ways to be recognized and have a voice in the room is to draw attention to your appearance. So, I mean, there is a game plan behind that whole thing. It's to have a seat at the table, to be able to say what you want to say. And the more command you look like you're in, the more confidence you have, the more people are willing to listen to you. And so if you want to be heard and you want to be seen, you dress that way. If you don't want anybody to bother you, if you want to kind of meld into the background, you dress that way. So I agree with you that it's the way you think and feel will drive the way your appearance is,
Right.
And so I think there's actually a therapeutic value to dressing up.
Yeah. And I think there's also on another branch of that, there are people who feel like they're not confident about choosing their outfits. And I feel like that gives a lot of paralysis to people, where they just kind of gravitate to things that maybe someone complimented them on before.
Right. And so with that.
And there's a lot of stylists. There's so many stylists in Chicago. Like, Chicago's huge for stylists right now. But if anybody has an issue like that, like, definitely reach out and work with a stylist. Yeah. But the best stylists that I've seen are the ones that build the confidence in their clients. You know, they need to have that confidence and buying power to be able to put their outfits together, go out and pick things they like, to feel okay about liking the things they like. You know, conformity is a thing. People want to fit in with the tribe.
Right. You do want to fit in. You don't want to be wearing a ball gown if everybody else is wearing blue jeans. You know, you certainly want to fit into the environment. But
although that happens to me often out here.
Don't tell me you're walking around in ball gowns over there.
Yeah, I show up. Ball gowns and cowboy boots.
Yeah. I'll show up to like a meeting and people will be like, "Oh, Miss Fancy over here."
What are you so dressed up for? You know how many times I got that one? What are you so dressed up for? And I'm like, this is dressed up. You haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
Just you wait.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jess, for agreeing to be on our podcast. You're a fascinating guest. You gave us a lot to think about.
Yes.
You came at it from a very different perspective than some, recent guests that we've had. So that's why we like to interview people from all spectrums of the fashion industry, because there's so many different insights and different ways to look at this particular question that we're asking. And it never ceases to fascinate me how people bring up things that I would have never have crossed my mind. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for being a great guest.
Right.
And maybe down the road, if we're still around, we'll interview you again and see maybe where we can get those 3D dresses, because I certainly am very impressed with that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys again. I feel like there's a lot of things I didn't say.
Right. You got a little bit into this idea
of so much to talk about on this topic.
of leisure and how much we need it. And how fashion would thrive if we just gave ourselves that. I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about that at all. We didn't
There's
talk
a
about
million things.
History project. Like,
well,
obviously we need you on again.
When you finish your history of fashion in Illinois, we definitely want to have you back.
Yeah, it's gonna be ongoing. You will see updates from that. Like, the part about that I didn't get to was currently working on the Rising Star Awards.
Yeah.
I was trying to research the history of that and had reached out to some contacts and found out there were so many people wanting to tell their stories and give information. So that's another component of it. Like, I'll have to have some time to meet up with some of these people in the industry to like get their stories and get their media and information. So it's going to be ongoing. And I made that social media account to get it there so that people can.
Yeah, I saw it. It intrigued me. Yeah, it definitely intrigued me.
It's there and ready for when I start getting information to share, because I'm really excited about it.
We're excited to see what you come up with, because I'm sure there's going to be things that we'll learn that we've never even imagined. You know?
Yeah. And since this podcast will probably be coming out after the Rising Star Awards, and Chicago Fashion Week, I'll just mention that FGI Chicago is working on a trend event for November. And so we were talking about, people maybe working with stylists and stuff like that. At the FGI trend events, there's typically a stylist who shows looks on models from the boutique that the event will be taking place at. And we showed the FGI, I believe you say Communique. Is that how you say it? The trend report from New York.
Okay.
So that would be something for people who are interested in fashion to come and check out. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. Like, I love the topic, and I feel like I said, we could probably talk for a couple days about
absolutely nonstop.
Yeah.
Now, just give a shout out to FGI's Instagram handle if anybody wants to follow. So they can keep up with new events that are coming up, like the November event sounds great, etc. What is the FGI's Instagram handle?
So FGI is FGI Chicago. That's their Instagram.
Okay.
And then AIBI is AIBI Chicago. And then my is Jess Crane Design. That's singular, not plural. Just Jess Crane Design.
Okay,
and from
Jess
there,
Crane Design.
Right. I'll probably ask you to email those to me. So
Yeah, because we'll list them at the bottom of the podcast too, so people can refer back to them.
Yeah.
But well, it sounds great. We're looking forward to Rising Star, which I will be definitely attending. It will be over with by the time people see this, but I'm sure it's going to be a fabulous event at the Palmer House. And then, of course, your November event sounds great too. So if people want to follow FGI or Jess or whatever, you can find out more about these things as well too. And we will put it down into the narrative part of our podcast site. So thanks so much, Jess.
Thank you.
Thank
Jess.
you.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ta-da.
Oh, and video. Hey, 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 hey. All right. All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. It's Melissa and Teddy again. A couple weeks later. Just to recap our interview with Jess. It has been a couple weeks, but Teddy got fitted for one of Jess's custom designs. So Teddy, tell me what that experience was like.
Well, we're talking about Jess Crane, of course. And one of the things that she talked about with us on the podcast was how she thinks that things are so mass produced now and everything looks the same. And there's really nothing that exciting to pick from as far as fashion if you're buying, the quote unquote affordable market. Of course, there's always interesting stuff if you're going to buy Balmain or Chanel or something like that.
Right.
And so one of the things she decided she was going to try, because she is a dressmaker, she's been sewing since she was a little kid, she told us, is that she had this app that she actually scanned her own body and she created a dress from the body scan. She created a pattern and then created the dress. So it was an original dress. And I loved it so much that she sent me the app to scan my body. And I think it did it like in 3 different sections. You have to do it. And it lets you know when you're all lined up with the app and all that kind of stuff.
Because it's a 3D scan of your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to literally turn around like a little dolly, and it tells you have to do it in 10 seconds and don't wobble and all this kind of stuff. And if you do it right, then it gives you the check mark and to go on to the next section. Okay. So once it's complete, what it does, it sent it back to her. So she invited me onto this app. It sent it back to her. So now she's got all my custom measurements, 3D custom measurements, and she is going to then create a pattern for the dress.
Great.
And make me a dress.
She does this with an app as well, right?
I don't know if she creates the pattern with an app. I'm not sure.
I think she designs the pattern and then it goes into the app and it customizes it for your body.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Because I remember her talking about, how you can make patterns from a fit model for only so much time before, if the body is any bigger or smaller, you have to redesign the whole pattern because you can't use the same pattern that you use someone who is a size 0 or someone who is a size 16.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually work very well. And so that's what she was talking about.
Oh.
But then also, she buys dead stock from designers, their fabrics that they're just not going to use anymore. And I thought that was really, it's just it just was a brilliant way to cut down on what she's seeing as fast fashion
and waste
production,
in our landfills,
and then also buying dead stock. I love these ideas.
Right. Using or not even reuse, but instead of throwing that fabric that's not being used in the garbage or ending up in some kind of a landfill, she's creating individual patterns and designs and things like that. So that might be the future is, instead of going to the store, you just send your app measurements or whatever to the business and they create the pattern from that. Who knows?
Right. They're just just give us a little body scan.
Yeah, which would be great, especially for people who, most of us have most of us don't have perfectly proportionate bodies.
Well, I certainly don't. Yeah.
Me either. I always have to get a bigger top and a smaller bottom.
And I always have to get a smaller top and a much bigger bottom.
Okay. But it's a very cute bottom.
But it's very good.
And it's plump. She's got a plump butt. But anyway, so, you have that top bottom thing going on.
Right.
Which is okay if you have, like I have on today, a blouse and a pair of pants. That's not an issue. You can buy them in whatever sizes you want. But for women who like to buy dresses, oftentimes women stay away from dresses because of that top bottom issue where,
unless
if you buy like in a regular size 4, now 4 will typically fit me, but it depends. Everybody's size 4 is a little different. Some companies, the size 4 is a 26-inch waist. Some it's a 27-inch waist. So they may vary by an inch, and an inch makes a big deal, especially around the waist.
Yeah.
Because it'll grab you, So I think this is a great way to solve that issue. And maybe you'd see women wearing more dresses because they wouldn't have that top bottom issue.
Exactly. Because as it is now, I mean, I usually wear separates.
Yeah.
Unless it's like what I'm wearing today, which is a nice A-line dress.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that feeds into also what Jess was saying, this issue with fit.
Yeah.
And everything looking kind of the same.
Yeah.
This other thing Jess was talking about, it was kind of like, fashion is dead, long live fashion. I wish that she would have said it because it would have like totally fit in with what she was saying.
Long live fashion.
Right. She's like, fashion is dead. Everything sucks.
Right.
Right. The world is on fire.
Right. And I said to her, well, then what the heck are we going to do? We have no hope. We have no hope.
Oh, right. But then I think she was talking about like, we need to have a creative way to solve this problem.
Right.
Also, we need to be together in spaces where the creativity for fashion is allowed. And I think that's really what she was trying to get at.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
In a very long-winded way. Like, I think she got really excited about explaining why it was happening.
Yeah.
But the long-lived fashion was definitely there. She was like, oh, it's resurrecting. And
she's on the board of FGI. She's on the board of AIBI. And I'm telling you, you're on all these fashion and apparel boards. Give us some hope here, miss. Give us some hope. It sounds like doom and gloom. But like you said, I think what she meant was that, we need to find better ways to create fashions, have a little bit more originality.
Yes.
Instead of just this, like you said, miles and miles, like Shein and all these, sites where they just copy the crap out of everything, but make really cheap, crummy, shitty fabric versions of it, which aren't good for, which aren't going to fit in our environment. The only problem is, and that's the thing, is price point. And that's why you have so many young people, I think, buying from places like Shein and Temu and all that kind of stuff. Well, because that's all they can really afford. You can buy a dress for $15 and it looks, like one that you similar to one you saw in a fashion magazine, and you're 15 or you're 16 and you got your first little job. Right. That's really all you can afford.
Right. And it really, the fast fashion, it does democratize fashion. It does make it accessible to a lot of people.
Right.
So it's right. And that's why we look to the fashion industry to kind of change how they're doing it. So this thing that Jess is doing,
that's the cutest sneeze I ever heard.
Excuse me.
I'm using this slobber all over.
Yeah, this thing that Jess is doing, and she's kind of bringing fashion in this full circle of, we use technology to really mess up everything, but suddenly it's come around to, we can make it custom. We can make it one at a time. And it is much easier than going to visit a tailor.
Right. And if you're repurposing, fabric that wasn't going to be used anyway, hopefully it'll make the price point more affordable too.
Yes.
So the fashion will still be accessible to the masses,
right?
But maybe be a little bit better for our environment,
right?
And a little nicer construction and everything else too. Exactly. But I can't wait to see this dress, Jess.
No,
I'm waiting.
I'm super excited.
I know she's really busy, but whenever she gets,
are you like? You're like, it's been 2 weeks.
I expect everything tomorrow. That's how I am.
Well, that's how the world is.
Do you need something? Okay, I need it in 5 minutes. I'm so used to that from my own past professional life that I'm just still in that mode, even though I've been retired for 5 years now. I've been retired for 5 years. Is if somebody asks me to do something, I still feel like I need to get it to them within the next 15 minutes,
Right, on time.
I still haven't learned to completely relax and decompress.
Nice.
So what can I tell you? But we did enjoy Jess, and I'm looking forward to that dress, Jess.
And Jess, we're going to make ska music together. And 100%, I'm going to play one of your songs from your band as an outro to this episode.
There you go. So people are gonna hear her. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of music. I have no clue what you're talking about.
You're gonna hear Jess sing in her teenage lyrics, and you're gonna go, "Wow, that sounds a lot like No Doubt."
Really?
Jess has got a great voice.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that'll be entertaining. So look forward to that.